Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. So today we'll be continuing the topic for energy. Last time we did work done, so today we'll be moving on to energy sources. So first let's look at the lesson objective. So today you need to be able to describe, compare and contrast renewable and non-renewable energy resources. So the steps to success for today is only two. One, you need to be able to describe and give examples for renewable and non-renewable energy. Two, you need to give advantages and disadvantages of renewable and non-renewable energy. Okay, it's basically just describing the energy, give examples, and list down advantages and disadvantages. Okay, so energy sources, you have two types, renewable and non-renewable. So renewable energy resources can be replaced or regenerated. And it's basically an infinite energy source. So this can be reused over and over again. Non-renewable energy resources can run out. Okay, it doesn't run out that instant, but eventually it will run out. So because it can run out, this is known as an finite energy source. So let's look at examples of renewable sources of energy. So you actually need to remember all these energy sources. So you have hydroelectric, solar, geothermal, wind, and wave. So we'll be looking at this one by one and how this source of energy can be used to produce electricity for us to use. So hydroelectric power is the electricity that is generated from the kinetic energy of moving water. Okay, so hydro is from the word water. So hydroelectric is basically using water to produce electricity. So you can't just take water and use and make electricity from it. What you use from the water is the kinetic energy source. So when the water moves, so you're using moving water, yes? You're using the moving water. This moving water will move a turbine. So this is an equipment called a turbine. So the turbine will rotate when the water moves. So because of the turbine's rotation, you have kinetic energy there. So this kinetic energy is converted into electrical energy by something called a generator. Okay, so this electrical energy will then be transferred to a transformer, and this is the one that transfers the energy to your houses. So hydroelectric is basically just using the movement of the water, the kinetic energy from the water, to generate electricity using a turbine. So the turbine is important, and also the generator. Moving on to solar. Solar energy uses the energy source from the sun. So this is commonly the light energy. So the energy source uses solar cell to convert the light energy into electrical energy. So you have the solar cells there. So the light energy from the sun will be absorbed by the solar cell, and inside the solar cell it will convert this light energy into electrical energy. Okay, and that will be used to generate power to your house. Okay, so that's for solar. Next is geothermal. So geothermal is the thermal energy that comes from the Earth's crust. So if you take geography, inside the Earth you have the Earth core, which is very warm, and then you have several layers. Okay, geothermal energy uses the heat from inside the Earth. Okay, and where this heat comes from is from the radioactive elements that is present in the Earth. So this is the basic layout for geothermal energy. So you have hot water there. So this hot water is obtained from the thermal energy inside the Earth. So this layer here, where I'm pointing at right now, that's the Earth crust. It is naturally hot. So because of the heat inside the crust, it heats up the water, which is present in between the surface. So you're using this hot water this heat from the hot water to generate steam. Okay, so this steam will go to the turbine and move the turbine. So the heat energy is converted into kinetic energy inside the turbine or generator. The kinetic energy then generates electricity using the generator. Okay, so again, the turbine is just to convert the heat energy into kinetic energy, and then this kinetic energy then is converted into electricity by the generator. And that's how you use geothermal energy. Moving on, let's look at wind. So wind is actually the result of the sun hitting the earth and creating convection currents in the earth's atmosphere. You don't really need to know this sentence, you can just ignore it. But basically, wind has stored kinetic energy, and you use this kinetic energy of the wind to generate electricity. So how you use wind to generate electricity? You need a wind turbine. Without a wind turbine, you can't make electricity from wind. Okay, so first thing that happens is the wind blows past the turbines. When the wind blows past, the turbines, they rotate, they move. Okay, so when they move, you have kinetic energy. This kinetic energy is transformed into mechanical energy, and then inside of that, because of the mechanical energy, you have basically another smaller turbine inside that generates electricity. Okay, so basically there's another generator inside. So the wind rotates the turbine. So this is basically changing the kinetic energy into mechanical energy. And then this mechanical energy is converted to electricity by a generator that is inside the wind turbine. Okay, and then the electricity is again transferred to houses using transformers. Last one in the renewable energy is wave. So wave power involves capturing the kinetic energy of the oceans and converting it into electricity. Okay, so the rise and fall of waves has the potential to be an unlimited source of renewable energy. This is almost similar to water, the hydroelectric, but instead of using the water punya movement, you're using the wave. So now we look at the advantages and disadvantages of renewable source of energy. The advantages is one, it's infinite, so it's reusable. It doesn't really run out. Next, it's environmentally friendly. It doesn't really hurt the environment because it is from the environment. The disadvantages requires a lot of space. You need huge space to build that factory. Like the wind turbines, you need a lot of wind turbines to actually generate electricity. Not always accessible. So for example, if you're using solar energy, right, at night you can't use it. Okay, it's only for the morning. What if it's during winter, for example? I know Brunei doesn't have winter, but for example, other countries that has winter, their sunlight is not that long. It's not like us, 12 hours long or something. It's only like 5 hours during winter. So it's not always accessible. And it's expensive to set up. Making all those equipments and ensuring they work with maintenance is expensive. Okay, now let's move on to non-renewable source of energy. You just need to know two: fossil fuels and nuclear. You should know fossil fuels because that's the primary source of income for Brunei Darussalam. So fossil fuels is using coal, oil and natural gas. Okay, they are carbon-based materials that is formed over millions of years from the remains of ancient plants and animals. So that's why this is a finite energy source. This is why you can run out, because it takes millions of years for fossil fuels to form. Okay, how exactly do you use fossil fuels as energy sources? So the fuel is burned and the heat produced is used to boil water. So that starts in the boiler. So you burn the fuel and the heat is produced to use for the boiling water. This boiling water creates a high pressured superheated steam, which is then used to turn a turbine. So from the boiler, it goes to the turbine. And the turbine then turns. So again, kinetic energy. So it goes from, let's go again. goes from fuel, which is chemical energy, to heat, to kinetic, and then finally, after the kinetic energy, after the turbine moves, the generator generates electricity. Okay, so the kinetic energy turns into electrical energy, and this electrical energy goes to your houses. Okay, the cooling towers here is basically just to cool the steam, so the whole system doesn't overheat. So advantages of fossil fuels, they're readily available, easily transported, low fuel costs, low building costs, and short startup times. You just need to burn it. The disadvantages is they're non-renewable, they cause acid rain, and they cause a greenhouse effect. So this is an environmental impact. And they're inefficient. Okay, moving on to nuclear energy. We don't really use nuclear energy here, but you need to know it anyway. So nuclear energy is a nuclear source that releases heat energy in a process called nuclear fission. So nuclear fission is basically a chemical process that splits the atom, and when the atom splits, a lot of energy is released. Right? And use the energy from the nuclear, sorry. So you use the heat energy from the nuclear fission to generate electricity. Let's look at advantages of nuclear power. It's cheaper to run once built, conserves fossil fuels, no sulfur dioxide, no carbon dioxide emissions, so not much on environmental and greenhouse gases impact, safe under normal conditions, and you only need a small amount of fuel, so less transport is needed. The disadvantages of nuclear power is that it's expensive to build, it's non-renewable, and it produces radioactive waste. It's also expensive to decommission. So basically, if you decide to not use nuclear power anymore and you want to stop using that factory, it's very expensive to clean the place out. Links with cancer and has a risk of disaster. Okay, so nuclear power has a high risk of cancer and has a high risk of disaster. And that's it for today. So that was a lot of information, but basically you need to know all of it, especially the energy change from the stored energy to how it actually generates electricity at the end. Okay, thank you for listening.